千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Daodejing by Laozi. As always, I would like to extend a warm welcome to one and all. Thank you for joining us. I would like to invite you to center your thoughts and direct your attention to this moment in time, to the here and now, to be fully present and mindfully aware as we all ready ourselves for this sacred process in the Tao with one another. Now, let's get into Daodejing chapter 76. We are going to start, as usual, with the chapter title, Soft and Pliant. And you can see the characters below, 柔弱张. These two characters, the first one maps to soft, the second one maps to pliant. And that's because the focus of this chapter is on the principle of softness. On softness, not on weakness. The character in the middle in modern Mandarin means weak, but in ancient times, it had a tangential, related, different meaning. The principle of softness is a different perspective than what we normally see in our world, which is the emphasis on the appearance of being powerful and strong. You can see this everywhere, in sports, politics, entertainment, just everywhere. Our world is saturated with this praise, adulation, sometimes even worship on the appearance of being powerful and strong. The Tao is quite the opposite. With the Tao paradigm, there may be the appearance of softness, like water, but beneath the surface, there is tremendous strength. That strength represents spiritual strength or true strength within the Tao cultivator. To see how Laozi arrives at this particular conclusion, let's get right in to what the chapter says. Daodejing Chapter 76. While alive, the body is soft and pliant. When dead, it is hard and rigid. All living things, grass and trees, while alive, are soft and supple. When dead, become dry and brittle. Thus, that which is hard and stiff is the follower of death. That which is soft and yielding is the follower of life. Therefore, an inflexible army will not win. A strong tree will be cut down. The big and forceful occupy a lowly position, while the soft and pliant occupy a higher place. So this is what I mean. The last two lines there is what I meant when I said that in our world, we usually see the appearance of strength, the appearance of power put in a high place. Laozi is basically saying that in reality, it is the gentle, it is the soft that has true strength beneath the surface. That is what really occupies the higher place. The softness and pliancy, Laozi is going to talk about how those are the signposts, those are the hallmarks for that hidden strength, the strength that lasts. So now, let's go ahead and take a look at the repeating characters in the original Chinese characters, and then see how we can identify the sections. So the first one, if you start scanning from the top, you should be able to see that there are 3 repeating characters from line 1 down to line 4. And they're translated the same way, while alive. And hopefully, just visually, you can see that the characters are the same and they repeat themselves. I've marked them as pattern A, repeating pattern A. Then, moving on, we can see that the second line has characters in common with line 5, which is the line following line 4. So let's go ahead and highlight those as well. And these characters are translated the same way, when dead. You can tell this is repeating pattern B. They are the same characters. So when we scan further down, like line 3, we don't see any characters in common with line 6. You can then conclude that we have found our section 1. The beginning section is basically talking about how human beings, the difference when you're alive versus when you're dead is the softness and pliancy of the body. When dead, the body becomes stiff. And the same thing happens with all living things, whether animals or plants. They, when they are alive, also exhibit the softness of life. When they're dead, they also stiffen up. Plants in particular become dry and brittle. So that's what it says. It makes sense as the first section. Now let's scan further down. We can see that line 6 and line 8, they both have the same character that's at the very end. The very last character is a repeating pattern for 6 and 8. Translated the same way, that which. That character can also be translated as he who, she who, they who. In this case, it is that which. It's all context dependent. Then we can see that line 7 and line 9, those 2 lines also have repeating patterns. Let me highlight them. Translation is the same, is the follower of. So the difference between line 7 and line 9, you can see in English, there's only one word difference between the two. There's death and then there's life. So if you look at the first character of line 7, well, you can tell, you can guess, that is the character for death. In a similar way, when you look at the first character for line 9, that is the character for life. So looking further down, we don't see that pattern being repeated further down, and therefore we have located our second section. So this shows us the overall organization, overall structure of chapter 76. It's a chapter with 3 sections, and the concluding section has 4 lines. And in the concluding section, we also see some repetition. You can see that line 12 and line 13 have the third character in common, and that's translated the same way, occupy. So the reason why I can do this is because the translation that I have created is a very accurate and faithful translation of the original. There's no rephrasing, there's no paraphrasing or interpretation within the translation. So everything in the original can map to something in the translated line. That is unfortunately not the case with many translations out there. Now that we have seen the sections, we can now explore this chapter line by line, starting with the first line. We'll do the first 2 lines first to begin with. Line 1 says, while alive, the body is soft and pliant. So let me single out the first three characters to talk about those, to break those down. The very first character is a person. If plural, it will be persons or people. And you can also say humans or human beings. All of those will be accurate translations of the first character. The second character is the apostrophe S. So we don't really have a word in English for apostrophe S except of, OF in reverse. So I just put in apostrophe S here. So this is like persons, and then the last character there, the third character, or the third character in line 1, that's the character for life, alive, living, and so on. So when you string these together, persons, alive, what is that? Well, the meaning is when a person is alive. So remember, the syntax of Mandarin and ancient Chinese don't necessarily follow the same syntax that we're used to in English. So this, basically what this is saying is that this chapter starts with a discussion of people, human beings, and then later on it's going to extend that metaphor to all living things. And it'll say the 10,000 things, the plants, and so on. Now I want to also single out the other character in line 2, the character for death, because this is the point I want to make. Death is the end state with no further possibilities. That is, no further possibilities in this world in which we live. Let me say it another way. Life, you know and I know, life is full of possibilities. You can make choices. You have options. You can decide to do this or that. Death is the end of all possibilities in this mortal realm. Therefore, throughout the Daodejing, life is presented by Laozi as positive and death negative. This is one of the reasons why we would say that it isn't true to claim that there's no good or bad in the Tao. Clearly, in the Daodejing, Laozi is presenting life as a good thing because it is a good thing to have possibilities. It is not a good thing when those possibilities in this world are cut off. So in the context of this life in which we live, this world, the here and now, we do have a good and bad. We do have a positive and negative. Now, Tao philosophy is very sophisticated and it goes on beyond that. So for instance, Zhuangzi, the storyteller, the storytelling master of the Tao, Zhuangzi presented an expanded view beyond this point about the good and bad, positive and negative. Zhuangzi said through one of his stories that, well, we don't know much at all about the afterlife. Now, some people will take the unknown and become fearful, but from Zhuangzi, he presented the perspective that because we don't know much about it, we should not fear it, the opposite mindset. So that point he made that, hey, who knows, maybe the afterlife can be interesting, exciting, fun, full of options and activities. We don't really know. This doesn't invalidate the point that we're talking about here that Laozi is making, because Laozi is focused on the here and now. Laozi is saying, hey, when someone dies, there's nothing more they can do here. Yeah, they may go on in the afterlife, but they're done. They're done here. They're done in terms of this lifetime. So be careful. It isn't true to say that there's no good and bad in the Tao, but that thinking makes it so. Many people who say that, they don't really have access to the original. They cannot really read the original. So they may end up with a distorted idea of what it says or inject their own concepts into it. Let's continue on. Let's focus on another character, the second from the last character in line 1. This is Rou. And in pinyin, it looks like it might sound like Rao, but it's Rou. It's a difficult sound that has no exact equivalent in English, so it's one of the most difficult sounds for students of Mandarin. And the meaning of that is simple enough, is soft. So now I want to actually combine this character with the character that you see in this slide from the upper right-hand corner. If I take this character, Rou, and then combine it with the character from the upper right-hand corner, I get Rou Dao. Rou Dao is what is called in Chinese. In Japanese, it is judo, or Japanese transplanted to English. But whether it's Japanese or Chinese, the characters are written exactly the same. So these two characters are Chinese as well as kanji characters in Japanese. When we break down these two characters, we see the two characters are literally soft and wei. So as I mentioned, Rou means soft, as you can see in this slide. Dao, you already know it means the path or the way. So combining them together, judo is the way of the soft, the path of the soft. It is what can be accurately described as the way of soft martial arts techniques. That just means grappling, throwing, etc. Now, the emphasis is on using the soft to overcome the hard. This is based entirely on Tao philosophy. And you can see that in ancient times, the Chinese culture that was Tao-centric had a great influence on Japanese culture. It's the Japanese origin of judo is a hint on how the Tao spread from ancient China to ancient Japan. It's one application of Tao principles to the art of combat. Now, let me also cover the other character, the last character in line 1. So pinyin suggests it might be ruo, something like that. In reality, it is ruo. Ruo, again, a sound that has no real equivalent in English, usually quite difficult for students of Mandarin. Now, in modern times, in modern Mandarin, this character means weak or weakness. In the Daodejing, the context is a tangential related meaning of being pliant, meaning bendable, not resisting. This refers to, for human beings, healthy living tissues are soft and flexible. It can bend. So it isn't weak in the traditional sense of the word, but just that it is able to flex this way or that. There's flexibility associated with it. And indeed, we know that the loss of softness and flexibility in us, in our limbs, flesh, organs, even blood vessels, the loss of softness and flexibility can be signs of illness or age. And, doctors talk quite a bit about how if we live in an unhealthy way, the blood vessels can harden up and that can cause all kinds of problems. So that's exactly in accordance with this overall principle. Now, the ancients did not have knowledge about hardening arteries, but what they said, because it's a universal principle, it still applies. Now we're ready to take a look at the entire line as a whole. When alive, the body is soft and pliant. So this is where we talk about the counterintuitive nature of some Tao concepts. Usually, in Western culture, in our world, there is a positive perception of strength. So being weak is considered to be a disadvantage. And as I mentioned, pliancy is tangential to weakness in the language. Being soft and pliant can be easily perceived as weakness in that Western mindset. If you think about what we say to other people, what we see in our lives, when someone is accused of being weak, oftentimes they will say things like in politics, when one politician is accused of being soft on crime, that's weak on crime. And to be pliant, to compromise, can often be seen as a bad thing as well. The Daodejing runs contrary. The Daodejing emphasizes that softness and pliancy are the hallmark of being alive. Life brings possibilities, as we mentioned. Far from being a weakness or negative attribute, softness and pliancy are signs of true strength, that the sign that you can continue on and you can flourish. It is an internal ability to keep going no matter what, to survive, to overcome any obstacle and prevail over challenges. That's what true strength looks like. Not the show off kind of strength, but the strength to continue moving on despite challenges. Then let's talk about line 2. So line 2, we've got a couple of characters to focus on as well. These are the last 2 characters in line 2, as you can see. These 2 characters are 坚强. So if you look at the pinyin, it's a little bit misleading. If you look at the second character there, it looks like it might be can, but it's actually 强. 坚强. What does it mean? What do these 2 characters mean? Well, the first character means adamant, and the second character means strong. So these are fairly simple characters that are still in widespread use today. To have the 2 together is a very positive thing, positive expression, even in modern Mandarin. It just means 坚强, you are resolute and you're strong, you have strength. Now, in ancient context, in the Daodejing, this is also not positive. So that's contrary to the expression in modern Mandarin. Laozi is describing, with this term, 坚强, Laozi is actually describing a mentality that is inflexible, unyielding, or rigid, a rigidity that just won't compromise, no matter what. So with the understanding of this particular set of 2 characters, we can now talk about the meaning of the entire line. So we're talking about 坚强, the hard and rigid, the hard versus the soft. What we have talked about so far is that even though oftentimes the soft is seen as a weakness and therefore a bad thing, Laozi is pointing to the soft as being very good. That is true strength. Conversely, here we talk about strong, adamant, being resolute, being tough. Oftentimes seen as a good thing, but Laozi is pointing to that and saying, no, that's being inflexible, that's being unyielding, that's actually not great. So we can see what he means when he look at the entire line together as one thing. When dead, it is hard and rigid. Talking about the human body, that when you die, the corpse becomes stiff, using rigor mortis as a way, as a connection to express the idea that rigidity, being hard, being tough, etc., is associated with, aligned with death. And because death is the end of all possibilities in this mortal realm, that's not a great thing. That's not a good thing. So this line, this is the reason why I say this line provides a different, unconventional perspective. We have this cultural emphasis on the unyielding toughness being seen in a positive light. Like we admire people, for instance, who take a stand and they are unwavering in their dedication. You know, we say, wow, they stand tall. Fair enough. But Laozi is pointing out that being hard to excess, the association with death is reflected in the reality that the hard approach in life, in the life that we have lived so far, in what we have observed from other people, we have seen how the hard approach yields negative results. When someone is being hard, quote unquote, and I'll provide some examples on that, when someone is being very tough, it oftentimes will yield negative results. That isn't to say that Tao cultivators can never be tough on anything. As we're going to talk about as well, this is to be practiced with a balanced perspective, with the Tao of moderation. But I want to cite examples on how the hard approach can oftentimes end us up with negativity, get bad results, results that perhaps we wish to avoid if we had the insight. So in order to illustrate that, I want to bring in this table here. This is the way that authentic Tao masters would describe the difference between the soft and the hard. And I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to share what the authentic Tao masters would like to share when it comes to Tao teachings. You can see that we've got two rows here. The one on top is 柔弱, the soft. The one at the bottom, 坚强, the hard. And specifically, the soft is above, hard is below. This is to match what it says at the very end of this chapter. At the end of this chapter, Laozi specifically says that the soft has a higher position and the hard has a lowly position. So this matches that. Let's talk about the columns. You see spirituality, relationships, social interactions, and material things. So in this table, we're comparing the soft approach versus the hard approach in life in those categories. If you have read one of my books called The Tao of Success, 5 Ancient Rings of Destiny, you probably recognize the progression in the column from left to right. Spirituality, relationship, social interactions, material things, it's a progression that starts from within the heart, expanding outward into the world. So for more details, I would refer you to the book, but here, just keep in mind that the approach of soft or hard has repercussions in all of these different categories. And this is what we want to compare. So let's start with the soft approach of spirituality. What does that even mean? In spirituality, the soft approach means an openness of the spirit to experience greater awareness. Now you may wonder, awareness of what exactly? Well, we're talking about greater awareness of everything and everyone around you, plus greater awareness of yourself. In being spiritual, the proper focus is to perceive everything more clearly, to be able to look through the illusions of the world. That clearer perception leads you to sharing the expanded awareness of the Tao with the people around you who are curious or receptive. Because it is possible that you can play a role in their awakening. Now, this is quite different from the hard approach to spirituality. And if we don't talk about it, it's going to seem a little bit puzzling and unclear what exactly would be the hard approach to spirituality. From the concept expressed by Lao Tzu and explained by the Tao masters, to be hard when it comes to spirituality means to harbor dogmatic beliefs. The openness to learn spiritual lessons has been replaced by dogma, that is, beliefs in invariant, received doctrines, indoctrination, even when it becomes obvious that the dogmatic beliefs have become outdated. Now, the zeal in holding on to outdated beliefs also translates quite often into fanatical zeal to proselytize. That is, forcing one's beliefs onto other people willy-nilly. That is to say, whether they are receptive or curious or not, they're going to hear about it from the zealot. That is the hard approach to spirituality. As you can see, when I lay them out side by side just like this, there's a dramatic difference between the two. So next, let's also talk about the soft and hard approach when it comes to relationships. And I think you can begin to guess what this might entail. When you have the soft approach in relationships, it means greater care of your loved ones. Because of the greater care that you feel for them, you become more attentive to their needs. Because you are more attentive in this soft approach, it leads you to being more supportive. And this has the effect of strengthening the bond or connection between you and your loved ones. This is another way that we can see that the soft approach is actually genuine strength. Now, this is very different from the hard approach to relationships. What would that look like? In the hard approach, the openness to caring about loved ones is replaced by codependency. To be codependent can lead you down the path of toxic, even abusive relationships. When you are in a situation like that, so toxic, sometimes abusive, it can become very manipulative. That is, the people involved in such negative relationships can try to figure out ways to get other people to do what they want. And that is because the focus is on selfish needs. The needs of oneself outweighs the needs of others at all times. That can mean irreparable destruction or damage to the relationship. So again, the soft approach and the hard approach in relationships, dramatically different. Let's talk about social interactions. How would the two different approaches impact that? To have a soft approach to social interactions, it just means that you are being considerate of other people. It means that you are looking out for others, not yourself. And that consideration leads to you being courteous, that you can let someone else go first. You can open a door for someone who maybe have their hands tied up, maybe holding things. That you can be kind and compassionate even to complete strangers. So social interactions is on a different level than relationships with loved ones, family members, and so on. So these are all tied together. This is the soft approach. Using the soft approach as you interact with other people that you encounter in daily life. So what would the hard approach look like? The hard approach is diametrically opposite to the soft approach, in that oftentimes it is not considerate. It is quite arrogant. It just means that arrogant behaviors becomes a way to showcase one's own self-perceived, self-claimed strength or superiority or higher position. That arrogance also leads one to become very critical of other people. So we have expressions like, being hard on others. Don't be so hard on other people. Cut them some slack. To cut them slack would be the soft approach. To refuse to do so would be the hard approach. That means being critical. That means being thoughtless. To not put yourself in their position, see what they may be struggling with. That is the hard approach to social interactions. Lastly, I want to address material things. That is certainly a focus that we have seen in the previous chapter. It is also one of the major focus areas in this chapter. So what does it mean when you have a soft approach to material things? It means that you are not holding on to things with a death grip that you become such an incredible miser. Instead, to have a soft approach to material things is to be generous, is to have that spirit of generosity. That doesn't mean giving the shirt off your back. It means that you are open to giving, to be helpful, to assist. The generosity that you feel in your heart and that you exhibit in your everyday activities, it gets reflected by the karmic mechanism, so that greater rewards come back to you. If you practice this Tao correctly, that which is returned to you is magnified many times, bringing you affluence. Affluence is the flow of resources. So oftentimes people will talk about affluence as the flow of money. From the Tao perspective, money is simply one of the many resources that we use in life. So affluence is the flow of resources within your life that brings you into abundance, brings you into contentment, where you don't feel like you constantly need to get more and more and more. That that you become so wrapped up in greed that it essentially becomes a bottomless pit. And now I think you have a pretty good idea what it means to have a hard approach to material things. It means to go after material things, to go hard at them. It means to gather and hoard them and not let them go. It means once you have those possessions, to flaunt them, to show them off, to put a spotlight on them. And it also means anxiety. It means fear. What if the things that you have become lost? What if they are damaged, stolen? So the fear is real. And that fear accompanies the hard approach to material things. So once you see this table in its complete state, I think it becomes clear what Laozi was trying to say. This is how the different approaches apply to the various aspects of life. Now, in addition to addressing this, authentic Tao masters also talk about one other thing, and this is specific to the material things column that you see here. And it is also specific to the actual verbiage when the text of the original Daodejing talks about how the body can be soft or supple, or can be hard and rigid. An authentic Tao master would say it's not just the things that you can see, like the material things or your body, the state of your body, the state of your health. It isn't just that. No, the Tao master would say this teaching actually applies to the intangibles, to the things that you cannot see, things that are not immediately apparent, such as thoughts. The soft and the hard approach apply to thoughts as well. Thoughts simply means what you think about. It is related to the other intangibles, such as concepts. Concepts are the things you learn, what you believe, what you understand, the concepts in your mind. Oftentimes, the thoughts that you have revolve around the concepts that you have in your mind. Yet another intangible, different from thoughts and concepts, but related to them, would be emotions. So these will be the three primary things talked about, that hard and soft, flexible or inflexible, these are all ideas that apply equally well to all three of these, and they are related quantities or related things, for the lack of a better word, in our mind. These are the what we have in our mental landscape, so to speak. So the same principle applies, and the soft approach here will be things that we put on top in accordance with the last two lines of this chapter. And the soft approach when it comes to thoughts will therefore be on the top half of the circle that you see. In the soft approach applied to thoughts, you will see openness, being receptive, receptive to different perspectives, other people's opinions, to have thoughts that are flexible, that you're not fixated on a particular idea, that the thoughts are adaptable to changing conditions. You might have had a good idea that was a great way to go in one particular context, but when things have changed, you need to be able to adapt to the changing conditions. So all of these will be the positive thing that is on the upper half. In the lower half, we have the hard approach to thoughts. So a Tao master would teach that You don't just want your limbs to be flexible, you want your thoughts to be flexible and not fall into the hard approach, which would be fixated thoughts, thoughts that cannot change or cannot change easily, to be inconsiderate, to not take other people into account, other ideas into account, to be closed-minded, to have a mind that is locked as opposed to open. A locked, closed mind is not going to be curious to figure out new things. It is like water that has become stale, tea that has gone cold. It is not the best way to go. So the hard approach applied to thoughts is negative as well. And let's take a look at concepts. Softness applied to concepts just means new things to learn, new ideas to absorb, different perspectives that you can learn from. In life, we find that's oftentimes the case. No person is an island. We all need to sample other perspectives from time to time to get a better overall idea of what things are really all about. To be the opposite of that, the hard approach to concepts is to be resistant to change. So we've talked about dogmatic beliefs when it comes to the application of these approaches to spirituality. Here, it is the same except applied generally, because not all the concepts that we have in our minds are spiritual or religious in nature. We have concepts about different areas of life where we have knowledge or learning or expertise. There, the idea is the same. The approach, the hard approach, makes you resistant to changing the concepts that you had before. That you become dogmatic, not only in the religious sense, but also in every other sense. That you are fixated on just the one way, what you call the right way of doing things. And that can result in negativity as well. Lastly, let's talk about emotions. To be open about that, to have a soft approach that depicts emotions that are playful, fun, that are relaxed, pleasant, and there's emotional stability. It is not erratic. So this is what you feel if you utilize the soft approach. On the other hand, the soft approach is contrasted by the hard approach, which is a harsh state of feelings, harsh emotions. This is mental agitation. This is anger, even rage. And if it doesn't quite reach the level of rage, it can be stubborn and headstrong in those feelings that you have. And that tends to lead to negativity as well. So the advice from Tao masters that teach this is to say that, well, all of us wish to live the good life. If you wish to live the good life, you want to elevate your thinking, learning, and feelings to the higher plane of the soft and pliant. So all of your emotions, you want to elevate them higher up in the levels that you see here. In other words, let your thoughts, concepts, and emotions take on the soft characteristics of the Tao. That is what will ensure a life that is happy and healthy. Just like softness in your limbs, in your body, is a sign of a happy and healthy body, same with the intangibles, the unseen characteristics of a human being, the mental aspects. So I think with this diagram, that makes it very clear to everybody I think we're ready to move on to the next line. Line 3, all living things, grass and trees. Let's take a look at the characters. I'm going to start out with the first two characters. These two characters form one of the most common expressions in the Tao. This is when you hear about the 10,000 things. Let's break down these characters. 万物. So in this case, the pinyin spells exactly how it should sound. 万物. Literally, the first character means 10,000. 1. The second character means things, specifically living things. The utilization of this term, 万物, is flexible. Sometimes it points to plants and animals. Here, it can point to just all living things in general, not just plants and animals, all living creatures, everything from plants, animals that we talked about, grass, trees, insects. With our modern knowledge, we can even include microorganisms, all living things. Now, Lao Tzu becomes more specific and specifies that he's actually, out of all the possible living things, he wants to emphasize 草木. That's the third and fourth characters that you see there. The pinyin for this one looks strange. It looks like it might be pronounced kelmu. That's not correct. In pinyin, the C is actually cao. So this is supposed to sound like 草木, and this is potentially very confusing to a native speaker of English. How do we break down these two characters? Well, these two are actually pretty simple. The cao character, the first character there, the third character in this line, that just means grass. And then the last character there, mu, that just means wood. So when we string them all together, 万物, 10,000 things, translated as all living things. And then 草木, grass, wood, translated as grass and trees. And now you see how we go from the original text to the literal transcription to the translation. Now let's go to line 4. Line 4 says, while alive are soft and supple. So combine this with the previous line. It is saying all living things, grass and trees, while they are alive, they're soft and supple. We definitely see that as the case. We can look at grass. When they are alive, growing, they're green, they're soft. Same with trees. So what we're saying here is that softness is the common denominator of all living things. Now, even when we have an animal like, for instance, a turtle, it has a very tough exterior. It has this armor, this shell to protect it. And other animals have different protective mechanisms in their outer covering. It can be a very tough hide, different surfaces, the purpose of which is to protect the softness within. So the essence of the animal, that which makes the animal alive, is still the softness of the soft, alive tissues on the inside that is being protected with a tough exterior. With plants, it's the same way. A tree can have bark that is rough, tough, and protective. It is also protecting what is within. And what is within is water-rich fibers that is softer than the bark. So we can completely understand how that works. The other thing about softness, not just the commonality of all living things, it is associated with growth. Living things grow when it comes to plants, we think about how the plants can go from, for instance, a sapling to a tree, to a majestic large tree. And all the kinds of plants, not just trees, we talk about the creeping vines. That's vines that grow in different directions. It is reaching for sunlight. It wants, a better environment for its own continuing growth. So it's venturing into different areas. It's growing into different areas. And we certainly see growth with animals. And the quality of growth for the animals covers both the physical growth. The animal goes from small infant, baby animal, to adult animal. The size increases, but also growth in terms of the animal's area of exploration, that the animal can grow its territory by venturing into areas beyond its comfort zone. So overall, we're talking about flexibility. Flexibility points to the dynamism of life. Now, let's explore the opposite side of that. What happens when life is gone? That's line 5. When dead become dry and brittle, and this is to be combined with line 3 as well. All living things, grass and trees, when dead, become dry and brittle. And this adds to the previous description of unyielding rigidity. So remember, when we talked about unyielding rigidity, that was a reference to the human body becoming stiff, initially with old age, then in death. This is adding to that, to the stiffness. This is talking about withering and drying out. So the difference is important to note. Death is associated with withering and drying out because water is an essential element for life. When life is gone, so is the water. Death is also associated with brittleness and fragility. That is, dry bones or branches are easy to break. So, in contrast to this fragility, living things have a certain kind of durability. That is to say, they have durability to survive and continue on. They can move away from danger. They can do things that will help them survive. So the point here is to make sure we're not mixing up the stiffness of death with the toughness and durability that we need to survive in life. Different. And mentally, spiritually, we talked about dogma. Dogma, like dead plants, is often dry and brittle, fragile, and easy to break. So I want to point that out. We can all keep that in mind. So this is where we talk about balance and moderation. We want to practice this teaching with balance and moderation. That is to say, you want to be flexible in your approach without losing your goal. So within the flexibility of being able to change your approach this way or that, you don't want to lose sight of what you were originally trying to achieve. In a similar way, we want to be yielding in life, but without compromising your values. So in a similar way, the values are steadfast, just like the goals that you have, they are held in a constant way, but you can yield on the things that don't really matter that much if you hang on to your core values. And what I mean by that is you can yield on things like when people want to exhibit how arrogant they are, and they want to have a quote-unquote measuring contest. They want to have a what is sometimes referred to as a pissing match. Well, you can withdraw from that. You can yield from that because such ego-based competitions are not really that important. You can do without them without compromising your values. Now, compromising anyway, flexibility in any way, oftentimes are not well understood by people. People may look at that and say, oh, you compromised, you backed off, you yielded, you're weak. They may perceive weakness. In the Tao, in reality, it is true strength. So I have a graphic here in the lower right-hand corner. This is a plant that is soft and supple, breaking through rocks and asphalt. So something that is hard, covering up the potential for life, eventually life breaks right through because life is stronger. That softness is actually stronger than the hard covering. In the same way, the softness of water drills through solid rock. That is the softness of water overcoming the hardness of rocks. Same thing in life. The soft approach is going to enable you to prevail every single time. So I would like to ask everyone to keep this image in mind of the plant breaking through rock, to remind ourselves that we want to emulate that example to have true strength. So I see that we are getting to the end of our time together today. Let me jump to the summary and make sure that I emphasize and reiterate the important concepts from Lao Tzu today. What have we learned today? What can we apply to life? Well, the first thing I want to suggest is that we have now been given a reminder that we can observe the world through the Tao with the concepts created by Lao Tzu that are different, that are an alternative to conventional thinking. We can look at the world. I would encourage everyone to look around every day and notice how the soft approach wins in the end. What do I mean by that? As an example, in an interaction with one side is calm and collected, that's the soft approach, while the other side is loud and angry, that's the hard approach. It is the former that will prevail. The soft overcomes the hard. The side that is calm and collected, that is the side that is fully in control, while the loud and angry, the hard approach, easily loses control. And notice how often the hard approach falls apart. When someone is very, quote unquote, hard on other people, when someone is angry, using what they call fighting fire with fire, yelling back louder, going into contention and friction, that oftentimes it just falls apart. Nobody wins. The hard approach does not bring victory, and everybody does not benefit from the hard approach. So just by observing the world, seeing the results of the soft and the hard approach, I want to encourage everyone to do that and then learn from these observations. And then number two is that with that observation, I would encourage everyone to develop the soft approach as your own strategy in life. And suggestions here is to start by becoming more attentive of loved ones, to care for them, to understand what their needs are, to be supportive of them. That is the soft approach to personal relationships. It's a great way to start. I want to encourage everyone in your daily activities to add gestures of kindness in all of your interactions. So what I mean by that, as an example, rather than to pass someone by, consider the possibility of adding eye contact, a smile and a nod of acknowledgement. Doesn't really cost anything, but it can make a difference in someone's life. it can make a difference, at least in that person's day. And rather than to remain quiet with other people, considering, at least from time to time, adding friendly greeting to them when you see them or when you interact with them, perhaps words of encouragement. Maybe there's something they're trying to accomplish. Maybe they can use encouraging words from you. And lastly, the same thing that we talked about, to be flexible in your approach, but keep your eyes on the goal. The goal does not change, but your approach perhaps will change and can change based on different situations, based on changing conditions. So those are the summary that I would like to offer for the talk that we had today, the beginning part of chapter 76. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us all travel safely so we can meet again. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.